you. Now we move to E7. Centralize encampment management, parks and open space bylaw number 7370-2002. Amendment bylaw number 9389, 2023.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is for Council consideration and direction on the proposed centralized encampment management approach. This approach may allow for the eventual cleanup and remediation of Millennium Park to return it to its original purpose, in addition to restricting overnight sheltering throughout the city's other parks by authorizing one central site at Lower Patricia. Lower Patricia is protected by court order, until which time suitable housing is available for everyone. Lower Patricia is centrally located near multiple social service providers. Amending the Parks and Open Spaces bylaw to bring it into constitutional compliance forms the first phase of a broader strategy currently being drafted to attempt to reduce homelessness and provide for a safer community. This strategy will be presented at a future regular council meeting. The proposed amendments to the Parks and Open Spaces bylaw include provisions allowing homeless persons to set up temporary shelters at Lower Patricia. The city does not have the legal authority to ban overnight sheltering throughout the city until suitable housing for every inhabitant is provided. Achieving this is probably not feasible in the future. Selecting and regulating specified locations is consistent with our peer municipalities throughout the province. Some have opted for a centralized approach and others for a decentralized approach. There are trade-off costs to both approaches, and it is largely a policy preference for which approach is undertaken. The centralized approach produces numerous problems by focusing it in one geographic area as opposed to spreading discord over a larger area. So to reiterate, this decision is one of trade-off costs. The current approach, the status quo, supports ad hoc decentralization. By not approving the recommendations contained in this report, the status quo shall remain. This is potentially the least worst and lowest cost option. On the other hand, centralizing into one location allows the city to ensure the other parks throughout the city can be remediated and made available for the enjoyment of everyone. Administration recommends a centralized encampment approach as per the proposed amendments to the Parks and Open Spaces bylaw. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Sampson.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and thanks, Mr. Davey, for your work on this. I'm looking for some clarity. Due to insufficient shelter space in our city, it means that the City of PG is required by the Constitution to provide a designated location in parks or open space for folks to take shelter. Is that accurate?
Fairly, Your Worship. It is to say we cannot ban overnight sheltering unless there is a location that's being deemed to be so.
Okay, great. So in theory, because there's an insufficient shelter space in our city, we're required to allow it anywhere or designate a specific area.
That's correct.
For overnight temporary shelter.
That's correct.
Thanks. And just maybe some clarity on the Lower Patricia site. I know it's been discussed a million times. It is protected by a court order that we leave that space as camping permitted. Is that accurate?
That's right. The city tried to close it through court injunction and we failed twice. So now it is court protected until which time there's suitable housing for everyone. The definition of suitable housing is currently unknown. So therefore providing suitable housing for everyone is likely a pipe dream.
And not also the responsibility of the City of Prince George, is it, housing?
That's correct. That's the province under BC Housing.
I'm very confident, not 100%, very confident. I did not support centralized last time. It's a challenge. Both pose their challenges. I was doing some reading on Portland over the weekend, and one of the headlines was that it's spiraling out of control. And it seems that some options work for some period of time and then do not work any longer. And so it sounds like whatever option we take within our jurisdiction is going to be a limited time option anyways, and we're going to have to continue working with all the groups, all the stakeholders, and ourselves, and trying to figure out what the next plan will be to best manage what is in our control. I'm going to be blunt. I don't like the location. It has great impacts on a residential neighborhood. It has great impacts on a light industrial commercial neighborhood. And frankly, I actually don't think it best serves the folks who need to take shelter. I don't think it's near resources. Don't get me wrong, it's not across the river and down the way, but I don't think, we hear that the Friendship Center has some of the best resources. There's laundry and showers and storage facilities in there for folks who need to access it. This is quite a distance from that. This is quite a distance from St. Vincent de Paul, from the Needle Exchange, which I know is not called the Needle Exchange, but I don't recall the name off the top of my head. This is not a perfect location. I guess some questions, and potentially through to Superintendent Wright, if possible. Some questions I have is, whether it's this location that's approved or otherwise, what is the city, or other location I should say, what is the city capable and willing to do to help protect the folks who are in the encampment and the residents who buffer it and the businesses who buffer it? Superintendent Wright, I'm wondering, what is the city's ability to work with the RCMP, and for lack of a better word, direct the RCMP to provide a greater presence or patrol for these neighborhoods?
Yeah, we do. We have the capacity to do that. So, Council previously approved additional funding targeted for the downtown core. When we did see the Lower Patricia site start up, those resources, those patrols were directed into the Miller Edition neighborhood affected as well. So we could certainly do that. Last year, regardless of the decentralized approach, we saw a large influx of people once the weather got nice, and they essentially went there anyway in large numbers. So yeah, we spend a lot of time in that area, and we could continue to do so. And additionally, when I spoke in my report, we're looking to increase our capacity for bike patrols in that downtown core, and that gives us the ability to get there in a more efficient manner if we're on patrol within that downtown area and that whole light industrial area. So yeah, we do have capacity to provide adequate policing to that area.
Great, thanks. And with respect to the encampment itself, there's folks who are going to be, just out of statistics, criminally involved in that area, and there's going to be folks who are not, and they're going to be preyed on and in danger in some cases, I'm sure. What's the RCMP's ability and plan to help provide, I guess, service to those folks who are taking shelter in the encampment as well?
Yeah, so again, we do have that enhanced presence. The vast majority of these individuals do have cell phones, so if there is something that occurs, we've gotten called immediately. We've had a few stabbings over the years, a shooting in a tent there, so we've responded in a timely manner. We've also had those criminal acts in Millennium Park, so during this decentralized phase. So yeah, we do get called in a timely manner and respond in an emergent fashion.
And is increased presence, increased patrols, maybe even beyond what we tried last year? Does it take the direction from the city, or is that a possibility for the city or the mayor through council to provide that direction of a wish list to you? Is that required, or how does that work? If we say we saw what happened last year, we appreciate the efforts that were made, but we want to dedicate even more resource to that. How does that take place? How does that look?
Yeah, no, certainly just communication with the mayor as to what priorities are here. We try and adjust as best we can within our budget and capabilities to meet that. So yeah, we would be responsive to that. And
you can let us know if obviously we're asking something that doesn't work, and we can then manage our expectations.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Your worship, for me, no matter the location, and I want to hear from my colleagues their thoughts on Lower Patricia, no matter the location of centralizing, which I think is our next option to consider, is what are we going to do to be more proactive and active in our deterrence for criminal behavior surrounding these areas, because that's what we're hearing from residents. And I got to be clear, I'm not saying that everybody who's taking shelter is going to be engaging in criminal behavior, but that's the reality of what we're seeing in some of these locations, that there is some spin-off, unfortunately. So for me, it's deterring and documenting criminal and nuisance behavior, realizing folks who are engaging in that or connecting with them and trying to either connect them in with the resources that they need, whatever. Is CCTV in these areas as like a trial basis, even something that the City of Prince George is capable of taking on, perhaps through to Mr. Babbage?
Thank you, Your Worship. CCTV or video surveillance is regulated through the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and there is an analysis that's required to be done through the OIPC to ensure that the privacy of individuals is maintained in a certain manner, and that access to the video footage is controlled and regulated as well. So it's possible, Your Worship, but there's an awful lot of work that would need to be done at the front end to get the necessary approvals from the OIPC, and it would likely also result in significant resources to set up and manage, monitor, and then release that video footage, because it would be controlled by the city. That's subject to the legislation. That's in contrast to video surveillance that's done by a private entity, an individual or a business, for which we have a registry that we've worked with the RCMP on, where individuals can register the location of their video surveillance, and the RCMP therefore then has quick references to what video surveillance may be available voluntarily through an individual or business, Your Worship. Great.
Thanks very much. I think I'll leave that there. I think I'm curious to hear what my colleagues think about the location. I would be keen if we could identify a different location. I just don't know where that is yet. But what we're doing right now is not working, and I'm game to try a different solution. I'm just looking for some feedback from my colleagues. Either way, whether it's this location or other, I do plan on making a motion later that a report come back for the final reading of this amended bylaw that would see increased police presence in the east of Queensway and Miller Addition areas with regular patrols, proactive police work, and be able to provide that quick response. And also a report back with information on providing private security enhancements through that area as well that can document, observe activities that are going on, and being able to forward on that information to the police in the event of something happening. So that's the motion I'll be putting on the floor later, regardless of the location, but looking forward to hearing from my colleagues. I'll jump back in later. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship. This is a really tough one. I've sat here this is my second term now. A significant portion of last term was spent talking about the encampment and strategizing and trying to find a solution. And we debated centralized versus decentralized. And I think, Mr. Davey, you put it well in that there's pros and cons to both. There's no perfect solution to either. And quite frankly, both seem like a lose-lose situation that it puts us in. The issue I'm having is that I cannot, in good conscience, commit to the status quo option going forward. It's just not working. The last time this came forward, I was of the opinion that decentralization was the model that we should be following. Now, I We have an option before us. It's not ideal. You know, we can sit here and debate the perks of centralization or the perks of decentralization, but at the end of the day, sending this back to administration to come back with more options is simply going to delay something that we're probably going to have to pivot on in several months' time regardless. I live in the Miller Edition. I spent a significant amount of my weekend and last week responding to emails and fielding calls from residents, being approached by residents while I'm walking my dog. I had my mountain bike stolen from just living in my neighborhood. We are all impacted by this in a significant way. And my heart goes out to the residents in the Miller Edition because this proximity to the encampment does take a toll on them. It really, really does. And so I do, knowing that the encampment at Lower Patricia is protected by a court order, knowing that we cannot move it, we cannot change it, this is the situation we're in with the Stewart decision. I would like to hear more from my colleagues on how we can work with the Miller Edition to feel safer in their community, in their neighborhood. So I look forward to perhaps more motions coming forward later tonight. It breaks my heart to say this, but we need to try something. And centralization is on the table right now. And so I'm going to be supporting it. And it's really tough to say that because I know that it's going to have an impact. Decentralization is also going to have an impact. There's no right answer, but I know that we are all committed to doing good work and making a positive change in this community. And so I hope that we can continuously review this decision and evaluate if it's working. But this is the decision before us tonight, and sending this back for more options, more debate, more research is only going to prolong another summer of the status quo, which I just can't do. So I will be supporting centralization tonight. And you can call me, you can talk to me. Every single person in the Miller Edition, I'm here to get your hate mail and your phone calls. So that's where I'm at, and I look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say.
Councillor Sam. Can I speak? Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time here. It's getting late. This is an important issue. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I didn't know that we could direct the RCMP where to go, and that's good to know. So if this motion passes tonight, then I'm definitely going to direct them to go to other areas of the community on different occasions. So if we open up that door, then let's keep it open, because that will give council more control of what the RCMP do, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not. We know with the encampment there, it is going to stay there. It will stay there. People are going to find homes, like in the shelters and that, people are coming from out of town. And it's just going to be a revolving door. So unless we do something, we have to have a centralized approach. And in my opinion, I made a mistake months ago by saying, no, we don't need it. Look at Millennium Park, absolutely destroyed that property there. Now, I guess to Mr. Davey, if we have a centralized approach, we will be able to better prevent things like Millennium Park, Winnipeg, places in College Heights and all these other places from actually getting set up and be semi-permanent. Is that correct?
It's correct, Your Worship. But again, that's key word being better prevent. This will very much be a whack-a-mole situation, and bylaws are complaint-driven. Millennium Park is going to be a massive undertaking to clean up, should council approve this bylaw.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No matter what, there has to be more RCMP presence in there, and I think that they would know to do that on their own without us telling them, but we'll see what happens there. So it isn't just about the Miller Cannot. This is not going to get any better with what's happening there, and these people I know have been under siege. What can we do to, if that encampment stays there, one way or another, it's going to be there for probably a couple of years, you know, unless we can get enough housing. I mean, I talked to a guy downtown a couple of weeks ago, and he came here from Smithers 2 years ago, and he's staying here. And where is he staying? He's staying on the streets and in and out of the shelters. And I don't know if BC Housing and the province are going to be able to ever create enough shelter spaces with the migration of folks coming here looking for services that their communities have lost. So I am going to support this. You know, if it's going to be a centralized approach, then yeah, we have to do something for those residents there. When you're lighting fires, doing all this stuff, it can't just be, you know, a lawless community. So I look forward to, you know, some more debate on this, but we have to have a centralized approach. If it means it's going to stay there, which it is anyways, we're going to have to start working on some of these other encampments. And if we have to go back in court to finally get it shut down, then so be it. So anyways, thank you.
Councillor Polio.
It is a very difficult decision, but that's why we're here, to make difficult decisions at times. I think it's important to reiterate a few things, that this is a first step towards a broader strategy, and we're working on that and going to bring that forward. I was of the opinion that, quite frankly, Council should have moved forward with a centralized approach in July when it first came here. I really agree with Councillor Ramsey. I just cannot support the status quo. We have to do something. I guess time will tell whether this is the right decision or not. But there's pros and cons for both. But I believe strongly that we need to move forward, and this is moving forward in a broader strategy, with a new approach, with the hopes of making some progress. And I think we're all willing around this table to take those issues from all residents, in particular the Miller Addition and Connaught, and we really have to work with them very closely, to listen to them, to be supportive and do what we can to help them through this. The encampment, you're right, is not going away. It's going to be there. And I think I'm willing to give this a try to move forward and to hopefully move towards what will be, hopefully, a better approach. So I will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Klassen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Davey, can you explain a little bit the communications that you've had with our partners, like Northern Health, maybe BC Housing, but also just some of the NGOs working on the ground? And what do they think of this plan?
Mr. Worship, last year there was a working group between many provincial agencies. It was unanimous that none of those groups supported encampments at all. I did not reach out to see what their thoughts are on this approach. It's right across the spectrum. This is why it's such a challenge in dealing with this. Is some NGOs prefer to provide services on site. Other NGOs are not supportive of encampments, so there's really no consensus on the matter.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I really, because we're bound by the court to keep Lower Patricia, like Councillor Ramsey was saying, I don't think it's certainly not anybody's dream plan, but I agree with that. We do need to do something, and I do hope that in the future that we can have something that would work better. I did, yeah, I mean, because we're never going to eliminate homelessness. There's no way that we will ever be able to provide housing for every single person, because people who are unhoused are, like, they all have their own unique story and reasons why they're on the street, and I don't think we'll ever be able to, as a society, meet all of their needs. So I think at some level we're always going to have to deal with this, but I think it's important that we provide. I think I'll be voting for this because it does provide a little bit of certainty, and my hope is that as this becomes established and as we work through this, that we provide safety and security for those businesses in that area in a way that is cost effective and works, and as well as for the folks living up on Upper Patricia. I mean, it's a hard decision, but like Councillor Palillo said, that's what we're here for. And we'll have to revisit as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I, too, am prepared to vote in favor of a centralized option. I believe that every person who votes this direction ought to be supporting one another, as we also ought to be supporting all of the residents of the City of Prince George. We have that responsibility. We have that privilege as people who were elected to sit at this table. I have no question in my absolute heart that there is another option, but it's not right here, it's close. And until we take this step, we cannot get to the next step. I know that there are several individuals that have reached out in the last 3 months that believe that, you know, creating, and the superintendent and I spoke about this, that, you know, creating a space outside of the downtown core and taking all these people and putting them there, that's another thought. But that's not actually responding to what we were told in the court of law. That's not housing. So we need to take this step in order to clean up some areas. And I agree, the remediation of Millennium Park is going to be lengthy and it's going to be expensive. But until we get some of these areas dealt with, then we'll be able to clearly decide what the next step is. And Councillor Ramsey, I'm right beside you.
Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship, and to my colleagues, you know, I you know, appreciate the information and, you know, some of the history that was provided today. You know, I first off want to take a moment to recognize, you know, everyone who've reached out. I know, you know, over the weekend received, as all of you did, many emails and calls and copies of you know, a petition from 2022. You know, and I think, you know, one of the common messages were really, you know, anxiety and angst and concern around safety, you know, primarily for those who are living in the Miller Edition. And, you know, as I think Mr. Davey opened the conversation today with, this is kind of a preliminary step of a larger strategy that will be coming to the public table for council to look at, debate, discuss, and hopefully then be able to engage, you know, the many different community partners who it's going to take to work together to be able to move a strategy forward. You know, I also want to reiterate, you know, as you know, we're talking about residents. We also need make sure that we are taking into consideration the residents who are currently living at Millennium Park, who are living at the Lower Patricia Encampment. Those are 2 residents of Prince George. And, for some of them, we will be relocating their home and amalgamating community essentially. And I think it's important that, this work is done in a meaningful and positive way, and engaging those that we need to engage with to make sure that that work is done in a respectful way as well. I will be supporting centralization this evening for a few reasons. I think one that probably, for many of the reasons that other people have mentioned this evening, but I think another one to take into consideration is the benefits to some of our service providers, to NGOs, and to community who are helping support those currently living in the encampments. I believe there are opportunities for them to probably have a greater reach and be a little bit more efficient in their delivery of services through a centralized model as well. And as we continue to engage in this work, the more we can work together, I think we can be able to hopefully move forward in a positive way for everyone. But again, this is not I think this is not an easy decision as we think about all the residents of Prince George. But I think, to be blunt, we've heard it loud and clear for a long time that things need to change, and I just can't support keeping things the status quo at this time. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of the issues have been already spoken to, and the vote count is clear that the encampment will go through. But let me just pitch a few items forward for consideration. First is just going back to our primary purposes. Under the community charter, we are to provide services, laws, and other matters. We provide stewardship of public assets and fostering economic, social, and environmental well-being of its community. That's among what we're supposed to be doing, and we haven't been able to do that for all of our members. It's terrible, the location. The province has constrained us to make sure that our dehoused people are able to live in a spot that's in a flood zone in the middle of a road allotment. What a terrible location. It's not good. It's not a healthy, safe place to be living, and there should be another. We are constrained to keep that space open until they provide suitable housing, and as Mr. Davies said, that's a bit of a pipe dream. So let's go back to our main purposes. In preparation for tonight, I was talking to a Miller Edition resident, a newcomer who's just started a family in the Miller Edition. It brought me back to starting our family on Hemlock Street, and in 2006 having our bikes stolen, and how frightening it is. And then reading the emails of the experience, the lived experience of people in the Miller Edition are having right now, and the frightening, horrific experiences too. I don't think we're under any impression that if tomorrow homelessness were to end, that crime would end. So we've got two issues we've got to deal with. We've got to make sure that people are safe and that they feel safe. That's a big issue. Superintendent Wright said that the tools are available and we can work towards that and make it better. Well, we have to do better than that. We have to make it happen. That's one piece. But the second piece, which is separate, is making sure that our dehoused community has a safe, adequate, healthy place to live. Spreading that out all across Prince George, with us not even knowing where people are, makes it difficult for the city and for our NGOs to provide the services that we are required to provide for them. It's not the best solution, but it is the best solution that we have right now. I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
mean, these people need love like everybody else does.
Point of order.
Point of order, thank you. We're supposed to be educated.
Councillor Sampson, you want to, I could have given one more chance. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I'll be honest, I was really hoping my colleagues would have a different location that they could point out, because I want that, but I also can't think of another location. I support a centralized model now because we've tried decentralized. I thought it was the best choice at the time. I thought it would have a lower impact, and it didn't. It's had a greater impact. It's making it harder to provide services, and it's having a greater impact on the community as a whole. But as I said earlier, the location sucks. Lower Patricia isn't just bad for the neighboring residents or the neighboring businesses. It's bad for the folks who are going to camp there and take shelter there. It lacks services, it lacks resources, and I do believe it's far from the key services and resources that those folks need to reach, like I said earlier, the Friendship Center, Needle Exchange, and more. St. Vincent de Paul for food and more. So I struggle with that. However, the reality is it's ordered by the courts that Lower Patricia is going to be a protected location. It's going to remain open, and that's whether we choose to do this or not. Folks are going to camp there, and just like we saw last year, we will see more congregate to that area as a common ground. I guess I'm wondering, for servicing that site, what is our plan? What is our plan to service that site with keeping the residents in mind, maybe through to Mr. Davey? How are we going to ensure that we're not going to be able to go in and say, hey, here's the building code, build a shelter that meets the code, but what can we do to ensure first responders can get in, whether it's police for a police matter or ambulance for medical, fire, whatever it may be? What is our plan for that to maintain access?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So what is being presented here is a passive encampment management approach. If we wanted to shift this to a more active approach to provide for that safe access and egress for emergency vehicles, we'd have to be looking at no post barriers along the roadway, fencing, security, and what have you. None of that is being costed out. It certainly could be if that was Council's intention as part of final reading.
I don't want to get to the point of governing an encampment. I think that's an endless. I don't think we have the resources. I don't think we have the experience, the manpower, the know-how, but I do hope that we can have some foundational access maintained so first responders can safely, quickly get on site as needed to help the folks who will be taking shelter there. So I will support this. I do see it as our least worst option right now. I don't think there, as I think Mr. Davies said, there's not necessarily a great option, but we need to try something that's going to be the least worst. I do think this is the least worst. I think it's going to be, we got to try it. My last point, and I'll jump in later with the respect to the motion I mentioned earlier with enhancing police services. My last question, I guess, to Mr. Davey is, we might not be able to provide those resources, but what are we, what will we do if this passes tonight? How do we communicate with the NGOs, BC Housing, other groups that do provide services to get connected to help the folks, as some of them will transition naturally into Lower Patricia if this is passed, and once folks are taking shelter in Lower Patricia, what are those organizations doing to provide the resources that they provide?
So, Your Worship, as part of that larger strategy, we'd be looking at building operational working groups with our partners to see what sort of services we could provide. But really that would come back to that policy level question to decide if Council wants to have more of an active management approach. What we really have to be careful with here is, based on the experiences of other cities such as Vancouver right now and Maple Ridge, it's if we start to incrementally move towards active management, we're likely going to take on a inherently unmanageable problem. So we have to be cautious of trying to find that line between safety for the inhabitants of the encampment, with the security of the businesses and residents beyond that. So at the end of the day, the more resources we put into this, the costs will just continue to expand, and there's really not going to be, in my opinion, much return on that investment.
Great, thanks, Mr. Davey. I guess for me, it's not that I'm looking to take an active leadership role or management of the site. We don't have those resources, skills, or know-how. It's more just our communication rollout. If this passes, it's just connecting with BC Housing and letting them know that this is the strategy or the decision of council and the city, and so they need to be able to respond appropriately with whatever they are required and mandated to provide. And same with other groups, just letting them know what our direction is so that they're clear in where the city's at. So that would be my hope if this passes tonight. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'd like to move recommendation 1.
Second. Okay, Councillor Bennett?
Cool. Thank you, Your Worship. So just, I think my initial comment, I won't speak to now because the recommendation has been moved. I guess my question through to Mr. Davey is, so tonight we're looking at the first 3 readings of the amendment to the bylaw. The approval will come at a future council meeting. Other than like, people reaching out to members of council, is there any other work to engage? Again, there's probably things that we as a council aren't necessarily thinking about the impacts, either both for or against centralization. Is there an opportunity for any other than if people just reach out to council to gather that information before final reading?
Well,
is there a process is there a normal process in place for that additional consultation prior to final?
Your Worship, generally speaking, no. If that was something council wanted to do, they could. But again, I would offer the guidance that this is a very divisive issue, and you're probably not going to arrive at much of a compromise or consensus across the board. And there will be probably lots of unintended consequences of a centralized approach or continuing with decentralized. It's really not a win-win.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Davey.
Thank you. I would like to, I know there's a motion on the floor. I have been silenced. It's not because I don't want to speak. I want to say a few words. First of all, the people going to be going to encampment, these are the citizens of Prince George as well, however temporary. First of all, we don't know their number. Last year was about 180. We don't know the number this summer, whether this area will be even large enough to housing all these people. There's no washroom, there's no toilet. We're doing a temporary passive solution until such time suitable housing is found, suitable better location is established. It will be done. It must be done. This is a temporary. I want to ensure the citizen of Prince George. We are not here to make a decision to permanently centralize a small strip of a place where I would love to turn that place into something beautiful, canal, beautiful area to reestablish the entire east of Queensway. It will take time. Having said that, that location is under court order. We're not changing anything by doing this decision tonight. Encampment is there already. It still will be there. Active solutions still will have to be found. This is a temporary solution. Situation is dynamic. We need to monitor it. We need to work with all stakeholders. We need to try our best to know every single person in that. We need to make sure BC Housing build more suitable housing, permanent housing. We need to work with the NGOs. We need to work with all the First Nations stakeholders, the chiefs. We need to visit the place often, on a daily basis if necessary, to make sure we know the situation personally. Not just talk about just during the council meeting, but we need to know them personally. These are our brothers and sisters. Solution, permanently, solution will be found. This is a temporary measure. With that, I vote yes.
Call the question?
Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carry. Recommendation number 2. All in favor? Move it. Do I have a mover? Mover 2. Second, Councillor Fazell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move 3. No, sorry, second.
Second, Councillor Skaken. All in favor? Thank you.
Move to extend to 11.
Move. Seconder. Seconder. All in favor? Thank you. Meeting extend. Should we take 5? Nope. Carry. Okay. Councillor Sampson.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to make a motion. It's the final reading for today's amended bylaw to provide options of increased police presence in the east of Queensway and Miller Edition with regular patrols and proactive police work for quicker response, as well as options for potential private security with regular patrol and being able to provide that eyes and reporting method for crime. So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Your Worship. And so just to provide a bit more context, I think it's our duty to the residents and the businesses in that area that if we're going to have an encampment there, that we do look at options for increased police presence and public safety measures to protect those areas. So just to report back at the same time for us to consider that. Thanks.
Yes, I will contact all the private residents there myself. As we will. Yes. Councillor Ramsey.
It's unrelated to the motion on the floor, but I'll support Councillor Sampson's motion. If I could perhaps just take a liberty through to Ms. Connolly. Between third reading and final, it's my understanding that council is not allowed to receive new information. Does that pertain to this bylaw change as well?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Ramsey, no, it does not. That pertains to a public hearing process, and the process for this bylaw is outside of that, and it's the first 3 readings by council, and then it would return for final reading and adoption and become effective on that date.
So we can receive new information from
That's
the public
correct.
on this. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that.
Would you like to restate the motion to the floor?
I will do my best, Your Worship, and Councillor Sampson can correct me if this is off, but that administration be directed to bring forward a report at the open meeting to coincide with final reading and adoption of proposed amending bylaw 9389/2023 with options to increase police presence in the Miller Edition and downtown and options for private security for regular patrols in the same area.
Correct? That's correct. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.